Late one night, Jake was lying in his bed when he heard soft footsteps outside his door. He froze, listening closely. The sound stopped just outside his room, and then slowly the door creaked open. "Mom," Jake whispered, but no one answered. He peeked through the crack, but the hallway was empty. Shrugging it off, he got up to close the door, only to stop when he saw a figure standing in the dark corner of his room. It was him, or at least it looked like him, pale, with wide, hollow eyes. "Don't move," it whispered, its voice eerily familiar. The door slammed shut behind him. It was midnight when the knock came on Mark's door. He lived alone, and it was unusual. He peeked through the peephole and could not see anybody. Shaking it off, he returned to the couch. A few minutes later, the knock came again, this time louder. Curious and a bit nervous, Mark opened the door. No one was there, but he noticed a small, crumpled piece of paper on the ground. He picked it up and unfolded it. It read, "Asterisk, I'm right behind you, asterisk." He spun around, but the room was empty. Then, from the shadows, a voice whispered, "Not anymore." It was past midnight when Emma heard the faint whisper of her name from the kitchen. "Emma." The voice sounded like her mother. She got up, thinking her mom needed help. But when she reached the kitchen, no one was there. Just an empty, dark room. Confused, she turned to leave, but then the voice came again, louder this time. "Emma, I'm in the kitchen." Frightened, she backed away slowly and turned to run. It was then that she realized her mother stood in the doorway, wide-eyed and shaking in fear. "Don't go in there," her mother whispered. "I just heard it toot, and it's not me." Sarah was home alone when she heard a faint sound from upstairs, someone calling her name.
"Sarah."
It was soft, but unmistakable. Her heart pounded as she grabbed her phone, dialing her mom. No answer. She went up the stairs, the air growing colder with every step. The voice called again, closer now, "Sarah?" Frozen at the top of the stairs, she heard it. A door creaking open. She turned the corner to see her mom standing there in the hallway with pale skin and wide eyes full of terror. "Sarah, don't go in there," she whispered. Suddenly, from behind her, that voice came at it once again. "I am right here." Late one night, Jason woke to hear his front door creak open. He lived alone, so he thought it could have been the wind. Then, though, he heard footsteps, slow, deliberate steps coming up the stairs. His heart pounding, he checked his phone. 3:15 a.m. He picked up a baseball bat and slipped into the hallway. The footsteps quit. His breath caught in his throat as a small voice, soft in the darkness, whispered, "I know you're awake." Jason's pulse drummed in his ears. The voice sounded like he himself. He turns, bat raised, to find his bedroom door wide open. He runs to it, but as soon as he crosses the threshold, the door slams shut with a deafening bang. In the mirror, he saw a figure, much of him, standing right behind him, grinning. Lena had always thought ghost stories were rubbish, but everything in that flat was different. It was pretty cozy, but there was one weird thing. Every night at exactly 3:03 a.m., she would hear softly padded footsteps outside her door in the hallway. She shrugged it off the first night. She tried not to notice it the second night. By the third, though, Lena was getting curious. She crept up to the door and looked through the peephole. No one was there, so she parted the curtains a little and opened the door, racing heart and all. Instead of a tenant, she saw a trail of muddy footprints going down the hallway. Every step she took echoed in the silence. The footprints led to the old closet at the end of the hall. Trembling, she opened it. Inside, there was a note. Asterisk, "I'm still here, Lena." Asterisk. Behind her, the door slammed shut. It was a stormy night when Emily moved into the old house her grandmother had left her. The wind howled as she unpacked and heard faint, eerie whispers echoed from the walls, "Help me." Well, she thought at first that it was just the house settling, but as she went upstairs, she heard it again. This time clearer this time. "Help me, Emily." Shivers ran down her spine. She followed the voice into the attic. The door creaked open by itself. Inside, the air was thick with dust, but in the corner stood a wooden chest. When Emily opened it, there was nothing inside, except an old mirror, cracked and reflecting nothing but darkness. Suddenly, she felt cold fingers wrap around her wrist, and the voice whispered once more, "You should never have opened it." It had been a quiet evening when Lucy got a phone call from her mother, who was supposed to be out of town. "Lucy, I need you to go up to the attic," she said urgently. "There's something up there that I don't recognize." Lucy wandered into the attic, bewildered. The door creaked open to reveal nothing but shadows. Then she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the corner. It got louder as she approached. With shaking hands, she opened a rusty, old chest. Inside, there was a small, old photograph of herself, except the girl in the picture was smiling. But she wasn't. A voice whispered from behind her, "It's not her. It's you." Suddenly, the scraping stopped. Lucy turned around, and the attic door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in.
It was midnight when the soft whisper woke Mark out of a dead sleep. "Come outside, it is safe." Confused and groggy, he opened his phone. 3 a.m. Shaking his head, he concluded it was a dream. Then the whisper came once more, this time louder, "Come outside." Reluctantly, he put on his shoes and opened the front door, but the air was unnervingly still. The street was empty, silent, except for one thing, a shadow at the end of his driveway. As he took a step forward, the whisper turned to a scream. "Don't come any closer." Too late. The shadow lunged. Emma sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through her phone on the couch. She heard a soft creak, like footsteps in the hallway, but quickly dismissed it. Her building was old after all. The minutes passed, and the sound grew louder, closer. She stood up, her heart racing, and peered through the peephole. Nothing. Relieved, she turned back, only to freeze. A shadow moved across the wall in her living room. She hadn't noticed the figure standing in the corner. Before she could scream, it whispered, "I've been here since you arrived." The lights flickered, and the shadow stepped forward. Late one night, a woman was driving alone on a quiet road when her car suddenly broke down. She tried calling for help, but there was no signal. Frustrated, she decided to walk to the nearest house. As she approached a dimly lit house, she saw an old man standing at the window. She knocked on the door, and he opened it slowly, staring at her without a word. "Hi, my car broke down. Could I use your phone?" she asked. The man nodded, stepped aside, and pointed to a phone on a table inside. As she walked in, she noticed the house was eerily quiet. The only sound was the ticking of an old clock. Just as she picked up the phone, the man whispered, "Don't use that phone. I haven't had a visitor in years." She realized the man hadn't moved from the door, because he wasn't there at all.
A woman named Emma bought an old house in the quiet of a small town. The realtor had warned her about the strange noises there, which she didn't pay any heed to. That night, she listened to footsteps above her bedroom. She thought it was the creaky floorboards, but then the footsteps grew louder, closer. She tiptoed upstairs, the sound now right behind her. With a shaking hand, Emma opened the attic door. To her horror, there was a note on the floor that said, "I've been waiting for you." Suddenly, a cold hand touched her shoulder from behind. At midnight, Sarah heard faint tapping on her window. Thinking it was the wind, she tried to ignore it, but it grew louder. Slowly, she got up and peeked outside. Nothing. Relieved, she turned to walk back to bed. Then, a voice whispered from behind her, "I'm already in here." Frozen with fear, Sarah turned around. Her reflection in the mirror wasn't hers. It was someone else, grinning. Suddenly, the voice laughed. "You shouldn't have looked." The tapping resumed, this time coming from inside her room. And the reflection, it wasn't smiling anymore. She was home alone when she heard the soft creaking of footsteps upstairs. She froze. She must have locked every door in this house. Trying to call out, she heard nothing. Considering it her imagination, Anna went back to her book. The little girl never let it go when the footsteps started again, louder, getting closer and closer. This was where the little girl's heart pounded. She went to call someone, but her phone was dead. Terrified, she tiptoed upstairs, calling out for anyone to answer. Finally, at the end of the hall, she saw her bedroom door open. As she pushed it open, A voice came from behind her. "I've been waiting for you to come in." Slowly, she turned. The footsteps were now right behind her. Late at night, James was startled by the sound of his dog, Max, barking furiously downstairs. He felt a chill run down his spine. Max was always quiet at night. He grabbed a flashlight and crept down, calling his dog's name. The barking grew louder, frantic. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, he noticed Max, standing in the hallway, his tail stiff, staring at something in the darkness. James slowly stepped closer, heart pounding. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. A cold voice behind him whispered, "I'm not Max." James turned around. Max was now in the hall. This creature behind him was smiling.